Hi ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another LivinginSAtv podcast. David here. Today we are going to speak about a subject that has been highlighted in social media and traditional media and has spiked during COVID times and culminated in a situation which a very famous celebrity lost his fiance. We don't know still if she jumped off, if she was pushed, is being now investigated, but this basically brings the subject of gender-based violence, and this is what we're going to speak in a 2-episode podcast. So basically this issue has been highlighted, like I mentioned before, and the cases are increasing. So this 2-episode podcast will be basically a way that we're going to speak how this gender-based violence destroys households, destroys families, relationships, society itself, and our culture, and also the impact that has in our children who live in this type of situations. They rather become future abusers or they end up in abusive relationships. So this is very important to talk about and to create more awareness about the subject. So in this first episode of this gender-based violence podcast, we will bring to the show a very inspirational lady. Her name is Leslie Ann Foster, and she's a director behind Women's Right International, and she was one of the pioneers in her field in gender-based violence in South Africa in an era when this was not even thought as a problem for society. She developed an amazing work and I have the utmost respect for her, and I'm proud to announce that she is our first guest. So stay tuned because this video once again will blow your mind. Hi everyone, welcome to another LivinginSAtv podcast. Today we have an amazing guest with a lot of experience in gender-based violence in South Africa. She is also a human rights activist. Her name is Leslie Ann Foster. Hi Leslie, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and it's wonderful to be with you and with your audience today.
Leslie Ann Foster is the founder and director of Masimanyani Women's Rights International, established in 1995 as a crisis support center for women and children survivors of domestic violence, rape, and sexual assault in the Eastern Cape. She received the honorary doctorate from Fort Hare University in 2006. She was also nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize through the 1000 Women's Nobel Peace Prize initiative. More recently, in 2019, was appointed by the President Cyril Ramaphosa to a steering committee to develop a gender-based violence national strategic plan. In May 2021, it was appointed to the board of the National Gender-Based Violence Fund established by the President of South Africa. First question will be, please tell us more about your project.
Yeah, well, Masimanyani Women's Rights is a social justice and equality seeking organization. So what that means is we're working to advance women and girl children in our society. We want to advance their status, and we're also addressing gender-based violence in our context because it's a critical issue and it's a big impediment to their progress within our society. So that's the essence of our work. We have different programs. One of the programs is to provide services to the survivors of violence, women and girl children. So survivors of rape, of domestic violence, of sexual harassment, and those needing shelter, because their lives are under threat. So we provide these services. We do counseling services, psychosocial support. We do paralegal services, so we can take them to court and help them to get protection orders or to get divorce orders if that's what they want, and also to find healing within themselves from the violence that they've suffered. That's one of the main programs we have. But we also do public education. which is about telling people about their rights. It's teaching them about the laws of the country. It empowers them to be able to stand up for themselves. So a lot of our work is with younger women, and it's about building agency, empowering them to be able to stand up for themselves. We come from a society where women have very low status. They're not well respected and regarded across our country. That's why we have high levels of violence. And we say that if we can show them and facilitate their empowerment and their growth and their development, then they have a better chance of avoiding violence within their lives. But having said that, South Africa is a violent society, and that's because of our colonial history and our apartheid history, and that violence has not yet worked itself out of our society. So we find that the levels of violence are extremely high here. But Masimanyani works across South Africa. We work in Mozambique, Uganda, and Ghana. And as I mentioned earlier to you, we've just completed work in 12 other African countries, which includes Nigeria and Namibia and Lesotho, Swaziland, not Lesotho, Botswana, and a whole bunch of them. So our work has really grown. I have worked in the Middle East, and I continue to have contacts there, but we have an international network that works in other continents. So we're active in Australia, the Australia-New Zealand region, and then we're also active in India. India at the moment is a very big, problem with the COVID over there. But that's who we are. And we really work at a strategic level to change the system. So we look at systems that discriminate against women, that oppress women, and we work to disentangle that. We work to really challenge those systems so that women can advance and can have the protection and the safety that they require, that anybody requires. I mean, it's up there for everybody, in the world. And we need to be fighting to ensure that everybody enjoys freedom and liberty and safety and protection.
Perfect. I completely agree. Okay, let's go to our second question. So what are the statistics regarding gender-based violence in South Africa?
Well, the minister recently, gave the statistics. He shared the statistics I think it was on the 17th of May or something like that. And the statistics at the moment, we have around 60,000 reported rapes per year. Now, I have to say something about the rapes. We say 60,000. Our population is 56 million, moving towards 60. So you're looking at around 9% of the population. But the reality is that only 10% of rapes are ever reported. So you can imagine how horrendous that number is. And what's very specific about the rape in our country is that you have babies being raped. We've got babies from, as young as 3 months, 6 months, 9 months being raped. You have older women, which we see in our organization, past 70, past 80 being raped as well. So that within the whole lifespan of a female, they are at risk of being raped. And what we do know is that 1 in every 3 women in our country stands the risk of being raped, or at least the very threat of it. But we also have extremely high levels of domestic violence. So that's something that we're really concerned about. And domestic violence can also fall just under the radar of, our legal system and, our criminal justice system, because it can also be hidden behind closed doors and so forth. What we do know is that during COVID, in the first week of COVID, there were 120,000 calls made to the National Gender-Based Violence Call Center. So that indicates a very high level of domestic violence. And because it happened during COVID, where people were locked down, they were, protected from, or at least, the word is not protected, but they were limited in terms of being able to reach services or reach support. As a result of that, the numbers went up. The numbers went up. But the numbers came down for rape during that period. And that was because people weren't out in the streets and they couldn't just be, taken off and raped. And also there was no alcohol abuse. The alcohol abuse makes a contribution to the levels of rape and domestic violence.
Basically, what made you choose this subject as an area of focus?
I'm a survivor of child abuse. As a young child, I was abused, by somebody in the family, a friend to the family, at least my mom's friends, family. And I lived with that. And then when I wanted to find help, because we were still during the apartheid years, there was no help for Black women. People weren't looking, there weren't services. People were very focused on the liberation struggle, which was an important part of it, but not on the experiences of Black women. And when I started to talk about my experiences and ask around, other women were saying, well, that happened to me too. And then I started to really look at what should we be doing about this? Should we just let it go? And I decided then, because there was no psychosocial support for women, that we should start at least a support group, for them. There were other initiatives starting out in the other parts of the country. There was Women Against Women Abuse, WAWA. There was POWER, which was People Against Women Abuse. And I learned from these strategies that, there was a big need for this work, besides to speaking to women about. So then I just started to look, and I mean, I didn't have any skill in this area at that time. I was working with street children. And I was trained, to really to work with children. But then I started to think, well, there's a need here to speak with women and to help them. And we started to do that. I just started to do that. Some friends came along. They offered me a building. They offered me support. And the moment the news went out that there was something happening for women, we were flooded. Absolutely flooded. And it just took, on a life of its own. And within a few months, we were interacting with the Minister of Justice, because the transition had just started. We were inputting. He appointed me to input into the new laws, the Domestic Violence Act that's in the country at the moment. And that was just amazing, because what we were doing was looking at what was happening on the ground, finding the gaps, finding the problems, and then putting that into the policy framework. And so I started making policy right from the beginning, of the work that I'm doing at Masimanyani, which was very exciting.
Definitely very, very inspiring. Okay, let's go to our fourth question. Is gender-based violence more prevalent in close relationships or amongst strangers?
I think it's a bit of both, but we do have higher levels of domestic violence, which means that it is close relationships. And what we've also seen with rape is that more than half the rapes that happen in our country are people that the survivor knows. And I just want to say something here, that we work on gender-based violence as it pertains to women and girl children, but we're seeing a massive increase in the rape of boys and boy children as well. So in the service that we offer, we used to have just women and girls, but now it's boys as well. So that's a growing concern. I don't know whether there's a historical record of that, whether it has always been happening, but certainly a number of rapes that are being reported now. And we run the actual rape facilities in Buffalo City Municipality, and in another one where we run the 24-hour service. So actually, anybody who reports rape will come through our center. It's a center, sorry, which is run by the state, the hospitals, the police, and the National Prosecuting Authority, and then ourselves as an NGO.
Okay, so the fifth question will be: is abuse only violent, or are there other forms of abuse that are also detrimental?
Well, there are. The thing is that psychological abuse can be very silent. It can be in the way a woman is ignored, or the way she is not listened to, things like that, or where she is cut off from her family. So it's not the overt kind of abuse where it's battery or, it's rape or something like that. But financial abuse, you can't see it, but it's there, and it is violent. Psychological abuse, emotional abuse, the other spiritual abuse, there's some people where they will be denied, the ability to practice whatever spiritual practices they have by a partner. So there are many forms of abuse which are silent, but which are in effect violent within their essence. But you can't see it, you can't hear it, you can't touch it. It's just that you can feel it and experience it. And it has the same impact of really oppressing someone, of being able to shut them off, and being able to really control them, because abuse is about control. It's about power and it's about control. And in our society, which is a largely patriarchal society, men hold the power and the control over women. So they actually believe that they have the right to treat women, in a really bad way, which it shouldn't be, but it is done. And so these are the ways, that we see violence happening. But there's also structural violence. And structural violence is what the state does. So if the state has a policy, say around economics, that discriminates against women, that's structural violence. And it's structural gender-based violence. If you have a policy that is neutral, and it doesn't recognize that women are most vulnerable to the impact of certain actions, that is a policy that has violence within it. So obviously economic policies which put women at the bottom of the totem pole, where they're in the menial jobs, they don't earn enough money, they can't really sustain themselves and those families, that's structural violence. So we understand all of that. Poverty is structural violence, and the brunt of poverty is borne by women in this country. I think in many countries it's women who have the children, they have the homesteads, they don't have the partners and the support. So that's those. And we have to understand all of those to understand, gender-based violence in its entirety. It's not just domestic violence, it's not just rape and sexual, it's so much more, and it's so much deeper in our society.
Okay, so let's go to our sixth question. Are men equally subject to violence as females?
Men in this country, more men are experiencing violence in this country, especially amongst young Black men. Okay, that's because the violence is embedded in our society, as I said, comes from colonialism and apartheid. But they're not killed because they're men. They're not killed because they're men, or they're not abused because they're men. The difference is that women are killed because they are women, because they are seen as the weaker sex, and because their lives carry very little value. And men kill women because they believe that they own them, or that they have a right to their bodies, their lives, etc., etc. So there's a difference between the violence that men experience as the difference that women experience.
What can we do as a country to stop this very concerning issue?
Yes. Well, it's there are many things, there are many drivers to violence against women, but one of the big things is the relationships between men and women in this country are fraught with challenges. The notion that what we call masculinity is very toxic here. It's toxic because it is enmeshed in this idea of men having to be powerful all the time, having to be in control all the time. And if they don't have power and control, they resort to violence. This is the way in which, masculinity plays out in our society. Another driver is alcohol, the abuse of alcohol, because there's nothing wrong with having alcohol, but if you abuse it, which happens in our country, then this also contributes towards, gender-based violence. So we need to work a lot on prevention. We need to provide stronger support to women, stronger educational support and understanding around rights to women and men. We need to respect women. We need to teach our boys and our men that women should be respected, that they need to be, protected, and that they have a right to have their autonomy within society, respected. Those are the things. So for me, it's about the thing I think is about prevention. It's about raising awareness. It's about educating. So it's all of those important aspects that need to go in, and then acknowledging that women actually have value in our society, that they bring value to our society, and that they should not be subjected to violence in the way they currently do.
Do you think that psychology should be taught in schools in an early age?
I think what we're lacking in our schools at the moment is really teaching people about relationships and about respect and understanding human rights. And it's also about moral decay in our society. Our society, South Africa at the moment, is a very corrupt society. And that corruption seeps into the moral fabric of our society. We've lost our moral and ethical grounding, our moorings. So the country's trying in some way to correct that. You know, in the early days, we were taught at school about, about respecting other people, about respecting your elders, about, having empathy and compassion for children, and being protecting, all of the vulnerable within our society. We've lost those teachings now. And that's really where we need to get back to, and of course, society has evolved. So now we talk about human rights, and if we understand human rights in its fullness, then you won't have these kinds of things happening. But David, at the end of the day, we have to do away with inequality. We have to do away with economic inequality. While people are poor, while they're hungry, while they're unemployed, while they have no purpose in life, what they're going to do is perpetrate violence. So at the root of this is the inequality. There are cultural issues that need to be sorted out, religion, tradition, and all of those things that used to give people, the right kind of anchoring to their communities, to their families, to their societies. Those things were ruptured by apartheid, and we had not been able to fix it enough, because we were building, but not going back to look at what was the damage, how do we fix that damage before moving forward. And I think, to me, those are the things that we need to address, really. And we're trying this through the National Strategic Plan that we've now developed through the presidency, that looks at those issues. And we have 6 pillars in that plan that says, let's look at these 6 drivers and then work on that to change the trajectory of gender-based violence in this country. And we now we're at a moment where where there's an opportunity to bring about really good change. So I remain hopeful. It's difficult work, but there are great rewards, and I remain hopeful that we will see greater change. We're seeing change already, but greater change will come.
What advice do you have to people that are in abusive relationships?
Well, the first thing I think that people must understand is the abusive relationships causes a loss of self-confidence and a loss of self-belief. And what we've got to work at is to understand that we are not responsible. If you are a survivor, you are not responsible for the other person's behavior. And you're not responsible for their violence towards you. That's a big obstacle, because women take on the shame and the blame and the guilt for male violence. You have to work through that and understand that this is not your issue. In terms, it's not your violence. What you then have to work on is the belief in yourself that you have the courage and the strength to get out of that. And there are little things we can do. These spiritual practices, like when I was married and in a violent relationship, I used affirmations, and those affirmations is just telling myself that I am strong enough, I am powerful enough, I can get out of this. A lot of women remain in abusive relationships because they think they won't survive. They think they can't manage or cope without a man. And all of that is the kind of stories that society tells them. But women have incredible power. I'm dealing with a woman now who's in a marriage where there is a lot of resources. And she has 2 children, and, she doesn't really have a job that pays. And she said to me, I am prepared to leave everything behind and start over with my children. And that takes a lot of courage, strength, and wisdom. And what actually happens is that once you get out of that relationship, you begin to fly. You reach new heights. You find new ways of being strong. So I like to encourage women in abusive relationships, seek help. There are places, there's a national command center in South Africa for gender-based violence, Find out what that number is. If you Google it, you'll get it. Look for support services near you. You can even just go to your doctor, because doctors are obliged now to refer women to services if they're in a domestically violent relationship. You can go to your hospital, you can report it at a school, but get help. That's your first point, of calling. Don't stay in a violent relationship, especially if your life is threatened, because we're seeing more and more women being killed today because they stayed in those relationships. There are safe houses around the country. There are not enough, yes, but there are places you can go to. So seek help and go to places of safety, so that you ensure that yourself and your children, most safe places of safety, take a woman and her children. Children are not separated from her, so there'll always be help from you. The social workers at the Department of Social Welfare, they will also help. So there's a lot that's out there for women. Previously, when I started this work, there was nothing. And in the 25 years I've been doing this work, so much has come about for women. So you don't have to wallow in this. You don't have to be afraid. The legal framework in this country supports women, the institutions. And right now in South Africa, we have the biggest political support we've ever had for gender-based violence. So if a woman reports, she's more than likely going to get the help she really needs.
Finally, how people can find out more about your work?
Well, we get a lot of people contacting us through our website, and the website address is www.masimanyani, MASIMANYANE.org, www.masimanyani.org. We respond to those immediately. You can phone us on 043 743 9169, 743 9169 during office hours, and you'll be attended to. The website, you can contact us at any time. And also, you can find us on Facebook, Masimanyani. You will find it under Masimanyani. It'll come back, Women's Support Center. You'll find us there. So there are many different ways in which you can reach us, and we will respond, on the double. So as soon as we pick up a message, we will see to that. Thank you. Yes. Well, I think the thing I'd like to say is that sometimes, things look very dark and dismal for us, but we have to remain hopeful. I think if anything, COVID has taught us that even through the darkest moments, even if you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, as the Bible says, there is still hope. And I'm always, I always get inspired by that. But I'm inspired by what people do around this country and many other countries, to deal with the issues and the challenges that they face. I've been listening to women's stories of COVID and their resilience. And it's been phenomenal to see what women are doing and how they're supporting each other. In our own province, women just started soup kitchens to feed children during COVID when people were losing jobs. And they were feeding up to 500, 600 children a day, having to keep social distance, having to see that they've got their masks on, doing this work. I'm inspired by the things people do in this country. And so I really hope that your audience will be inspired as well and wish to in some way, look at issues around them and to actually contribute in some way to that. There's always a way that which you can help, always a way in which you can help. And so that's really nice to know that. And if any of your audience have suffered violence, whether it be in the immediate moment or in the past 20, 30, 40 years ago, it's never too late to get help. It's never too late to get help. We've had people at 70 saying, I've been through abuse for the last 50 years, but I want help now. And we will help people like that immediately. And that happens all across the world. I'm connected with other shelters in other parts of the world, and I know that it happens. So there you are.
Perfect.
Always remain hopeful and grateful.
Exactly.
And I'm grateful to you, David, for inviting me into this program, for finding us and for being interested. You know, not everybody really wants to pay attention to this issue. So the fact that you are brave enough and courageous enough to actually take up a difficult issue, thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Much also. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your compliment. It's like what I say. Anything to raise awareness and take South Africa to a better place, because like I say,
Yes.
besides the odds, we need to be always positive, because there is always hope at the end of the tunnel, and that's how.
Absolutely. I like that, and I believe that.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much. Also, guys, this was another amazing podcast. Thank you very much for joining us, and I see you in the next Living in SATV podcast. Wow, guys, wasn't this so amazing? I'm so inspired. If you guys know about this type of situations, please report them in order to avoid future catastrophes. And let's be better citizens in order to have a better society, and raise the future generations in the right way. Again, my name is David. Destroy that like button and share, subscribe, and be sure you will see the second episode of this amazing podcast about gender-based violence.